You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. This week, my guest is Chef Chris Kyler. Chris served in the U.S. Navy, where he was part of a team that cooked for 5,000 sailors every single day. His first job on the ship was cooking hundreds of omelets a day, and he rose the ranks to become the personal chef to the commanding officer of USS Harry S. Truman. Chris has received glowing accolades for his work from former U.S. President George H.W. Bush and celebrities like Bruce Willis. Chris was also a finalist on season 10 of Food Network's Food Network Star, and today he's an entrepreneur and CEO of his own catering company. Chris and I recently sat down to explore everything he learned cooking for thousands of servicemen and women on a Navy ship, and how he applies those lessons today as he navigates life as an entrepreneur managing his own business. This conversation is filled with lessons on how to master the basics, focus on little details, and better plan for roadblocks that may get in your way. If you are ready to cook up more success in whatever you do, then this episode is for you. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Chef Chris Kyler. Where I want to begin, Chris, first thing you ever cooked. Do you remember? What was it?
Oh my gosh. First thing I ever cooked was gravy, believe it or not.
You cooked gravy. So how did that come about?
So
who did you cook it with? How did you do it?
Yeah, so that's kind of where my story begins. My mom, she's not a chef or anything. She's just a really good home cook. She's from North Carolina, so she's kind of got those Southern cook roots. Everything she makes is from scratch. And when I was a kid, me and my sister were living in the home. And I just used to sit up on the counter and watch my mom cook. And the first thing she was making was gravy. And believe it or not, I was really mesmerized by how she took, anybody knows how to make gravy. You kind of take whatever meat you're going to be cooking typically and kind of pan sear both sides. And with the burned bits, you'll add butter, flour, make a roux, and then you add broth. And then you get this beautiful, delicious gravy, right? And so that's actually a French technique to make a roux and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how I learned it. And I've, of course, mastered it over the years. But yeah, that's kind of my first experiences.
So you said you've mastered it over the years. How long did it take you to feel like you were pretty good at cooking? Like it was coming easily to you?
So I'd say, so now I've been cooking for about 25 years. I'm 41. I'll be 42 this year. Most people think I'm in like my mid to late 30s, but I'm actually 41. And so 25 years. So believe it or not, I really didn't know the time frame until that book came out, 10,000 hours, or, that talks about the 10,000 hours. And that's when you become an expert at something. And so at that point, I think that was like around 2010, 2009 when that came out. And then I was like, well, I must be an expert now because I've been cooking since like 1998 when I first started. My first job was KFC. My second job was Red Lobster. And so yeah, I had, by that time, 2010, I had already been in the military, learned global cuisine, learned mass production cooking. I did my culinary training in San Antonio, Texas, at Lackland Air Force Base. I had been in the fleet cooking for thousands of sailors, both in the galley, that's the Navy kitchen, moved up to cooking for the officers where I learned catering. Then I moved to becoming the personal chef for the commanding officer of the ship. Got out, started a catering company, worked all different types of, casual dining, fine dining. I did corporate catering for law firms, IBM. So I kind of really had seen a lot of different facets of the cooking and food service industry. So yeah, by that time, and I had purchased my first mobile kitchen in 2009. So at that point, I think that's when I'm an expert now.
Chris, I have so many questions for you. Let's go back a little bit. So first off, thank you for your service. How did you get into the U.S. Navy?
So It was actually, I mean, I can't say it's for any noble reasons, to be honest. My mom gave me an ultimatum. She was like, either go to school or go to military. I was, I was pretty much a good kid, but I was like mischievous. And so my mom wouldn't let me take her car to school in my high school year. I mean, my senior year. And I didn't have the money to get my own. So one day she used to carpool every day. I was like, Mom, let me drive the car. I had my license and everything. And so I took her car while she left the keys hidden. I took the car, drove it to school. It was the last few weeks of high school. And, it was cool to drive during high school. So I took the car, and one of my mom's roommates that was living with us found out. She was home that day and she saw the car missing, called my mom, was like, somebody stole your car. And so my mom came home and she was trying to figure it out, and she didn't know I took it. So I got in like the most trouble. She was like, you are like, you got to get out. She was trying to kick me out then. She was like, you either going to go to military or go to school. I didn't have money to go to school. So I was like, at the time, of course, they had the MGI bill. And so I was like, I guess I'm going to the military. So that's kind of my decision making on first going in the military, believe it or not.
Then how, once you're in the military, how do you get involved in the culinary training?
That was another thing. So now I did decide, I took home economics in high school. So I learned introduction to basic knife skills, introduction to baking. And I had all of these different food experiences, from the gravy to different times cooking with my mom, my first jobs. And so I'll never forget, they came up with this like forecast of all the jobs that were going to be in the 21st century making, tons of money. And being a chef was like near the bottom, right? So I was just like, dang, I really enjoy cooking. I really love it, but I want to make money too. And so I was like, going against my better judgment, I was like, let me just go with my heart. And so I decided, like, I think I'm going to give cooking a try. Also, they had a $10,000 signing bonus for the culinary specialist in the Navy. So that was another one. I was like, okay, start out with a little cash. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I decided to start in the Navy as a culinary specialist.
So in the Navy, you cooked for 5,000 sailors every single day. Eventually, you alluded to it earlier, you cooked for the commanding officer of the USS Harry Truman. So many neat experiences. Take me behind the scenes. What's it like being a chef on a ship where you're cooking for 5,000 sailors every single day? What is that experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really big operation. I was on the USS Harry Truman, which is an aircraft carrier, and so there's like three different kitchens. You got the aft kitchen, which is in the I don't want to mess this up. The aft is in the rear, and then you got the middle kitchen, and then the forward kitchen. And so the middle one was the biggest one, and so it's probably about maybe a culinary crew of, I want to say 100 or more sailors. And then you have the, we had stewards that helped the chefs. So we had chefs, and then we had, these people were like, they were doing other rates. Like they were trying to get positioned in different, flight decks, crew and this and that. But in between, they had to work in these other departments in order to support. So we had help. And there's probably about, maybe if we had 100 of us, it was maybe about, I don't know, 200 or 300 of them that support us. And so, yeah, like the first thing I did when I came to the ship was I was stationed to doing omelets every morning. So I was making like 300 to 400 omelets every morning. And so really, it's kind of like a brotherhood, and or brotherhood, sisterhood with the shipmates. And it was just a fun time, man. Everybody's young, and we're all trying to compete each other to see, who's going to be the best. You got that competitive edge. And so like, I'm trying to make omelets the fast as I can, because, to not get ragged out by my other shipmates and to be the best. Right. And so we had that kind of competition going on, but that actually got the attention of my superiors, which, was like, man, this guy's really good. He's kind of getting these sailors through the line really quick. Let's move him to cooking position, more of a line cook position too. They moved me up to cooking. What are these things called? Tilt skillets or kettles, these big, huge urns. And we would make chili mac and different things in those, like these big, like you got to have muscles to do it. And there was always these big guys on it. I'm a little skinny guy, but I had got moved up to that position. So yeah, like it was just, it was a really big operation where everybody had to be on the same page to be able to pump that food out every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But we did it, and we did it successfully.
I can't even imagine the logistics of getting all the ingredients and all the supplies and the equipment,
Yeah,
and then producing all the food and cooking it,
yeah.
and then serving it and cleaning up and doing it all again the next day. What was the most surprising thing to you about that whole experience?
I would say kind of for me was getting the food there, and once it was there, processing. You had different sections, for like salads and breakfast and lunch. People were, you were working on different things, and so. But to me, they had to fly the food on the ship during deployments, 6-month deployments, and of course while we were there, we would have like Cisco and different companies to bring the food, but to me, how they used to get the food on there, they would bring it in the big cargo helicopters and they would drop in, like they do, and you see the Afghanistan movies, or they're out this at war and they drop those big things of food. That's kind of how they would bring it a lot of times, or sometimes in the other type of ships. I mean, aircraft. I don't know what they're called, the big ones though. And so just getting that food on board and it's a lot of food, man. That was kind of like one of the things that amazed me in that whole process. But yeah, and then, we had some fun stuff too. Like they would do a lot of fun events for the sailors to kind of keep morale up, ice cream socials and culture day where they had, we had to do Asian Pacific month, and where everything would be catered to that. Everyone would come out. It'd be a little special than the regular day-to-day food that was brought out. So, and we would do carvings and watermelons and ice sculptures during these events. They just, to have everybody come out and kind of break up the monotony of everyday, work and war and all of that stuff. You know what I mean?
Chris, you cooked a private event for U.S. President George H.W. Bush, got glowing accolades from the president about your work. What was that experience like? And how is that maybe different from cooking for the masses, cooking for thousands?
Yeah. I mean, it was a really, really great experience and like the pinnacle of my career. I mean, I was a young chef. I think I moved into that position within 2 years of being on the ship, right? And so I always say too, it's a senior petty officer position. I think that's like an E5 or E6. How I actually got into that position was one of the petty officers was retiring. The captain had a big event that was coming up, and they needed someone to kind of fill that position kind of quickly. And I was like one of the more talented chefs I was in the officers galley at the time, and they were like, man, we need, kind of freaking out. So they asked me to kind of temporarily do that. And I did the event with great success. The captain loved the food. He loved my personality and stuff. So, because we had to explain the food and everything to the guest. And so he asked me, he's like, I want that guy working in here. And so that's kind of how I moved in that position. And everybody was hating too, because I was junior petty officer. I was an E4. And so, that was a great experience. And then, cooking for President Bush. I mean, that was huge at the time. Let me see. I'm trying to figure out what I remember. This is like over 20 years ago, but no, I mean, he was coming on to talk with the captain, and I mean, they rolled out the red carpet. It was really more of an intimate, personal chef type of experience. So it's not that I'm cooking, all that food. It's like we had selective ingredients that the captain wanted to use, and the captain gets whatever he wants. By the way, like, when we go out to see the different ports, I mean, they would bring in exotic ingredients from each destination that we went to, specifically for the captain. And, we would go through that stuff to pick out his dinners, right? It was just really cool, kind of what we were exposed to working for the captain and over the other sailors and chefs on the ship. So, yeah.
We're going to get into what you're doing now. And obviously you're an entrepreneur, a CEO of your own catering business. You've done the mobile catering. You were kind of a first mover in that space. But I'm curious, it kind of all starts to tie together. Customer service, client service. I mean, I've got to imagine it sounds like a lot of this came naturally to you just based on your personality and your demeanor. But what did you learn about customer service, client service, the relationships in some of those experiences with the president, the commanding officer, and some of your the other shipmates?
I learned, and I learned that really in the early 2000s. Yeah, like, and it comes part too of my character and my upbringing. You know, my mom was a big part of that. You know, how you treat people is very important, how you respond. And of course, I had a lot of bumps on the head going along where I've had jobs where, you know, I'm like, man, they did me wrong, I'm going to quit. And my mom's like, no, you're going to go back. And, and I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? Like, you know, I was justified in the situation, but she always, that whole, you know, I guess when they go low, we go high, whatever, but type of mentality. But so I took that into the customer service arena as well. And, you know, like I said, when I worked on the ship, I would say customer service working for the galley was definitely different on the ship. Cause I mean, you got sailors, like we're, you know, like dudes, like, you know, they have attitude with us sometimes. We had an attitude with them. But when we were at sea, believe it or not, like we were treated like gods because we literally control your stomach and some, you know, consumption. So we literally, like, they treated us whatever we wanted. They had these boots that were like really sought after in the Navy. They're called Locks boots. They're like designer boots today, but because we had to have steel toe boots, and these were like the Jordans of the ship, right? Like if you had a pair of these, you were doing it. Otherwise, you had like the combat looking boots, you were corny. And so, as you know, these guys would be like, yo, I can get you some boots if you hook me up with the steak, the lobster, you know what I'm saying? And so we would get our uniforms and clothes pressed for us. Everybody else just did their laundry, had to iron their clothes. As chefs, you know, we like I said, we got preferential treatment. When we got back to sea, when we got back in port, though, they was like, they forgot about us, like we were nothing. But as soon as we went out to sea, we were the ones. So going back to your point, I mean, your question, yeah, customer service is very important. And just my mentality on it is, of course, treat others like you will want to be treated. And just, you know, going over and beyond to meet a person's expectations, right? If they ask you for this, you know, going a little bit more to make them feel taken care of is kind of what I've learned, especially when I used to work at IBM and different places. You know, just being able to connect with the customer, to be able to meet them and get what they're asking for and just give them a little bit extra, I found goes a long way. And I've adapted in my catering company as well. And this is something I always used to do. I always wanted to cover my cost, but I built in just like a over the top fee, however you want to call it. And so I would give them what they asked, but then I had this little like fee that I charged, and you know, I would bring lighting or, you know, decor, and I have pictures of this stuff. You know, you'll see, but just like going above and beyond, and they're like, oh my God, have you heard of this guy, Chef Kyler? You know what I mean? That's kind of what makes people remember my name. Like, oh man, this guy, he's doing it. It's just making them feel super special and making their event feel unique.
That's so important. I mean, the doing a little bit extra, going above and beyond, and really leaving people with that lasting memory that's going to make them somebody who's going to sing your praises and market your business and market your work. That's really, really neat. Now, I've got to ask, Chris, you know, I'm not a great cook. I don't cook a lot, but one of the things that I always find just intimidating about cooking is the process, the planning, and then making sure everything is timed right and is hot at the same time and arrives at the right time. How did you master that? And what can you tell us about that?
It's definitely an art. I don't think I mean, I teach classes now with Hungry VX virtual experiences. So this is a space that I find a lot of people are in that same boat. They feel like, oh, you know, I can't cook. And I always calm them down, like, look, relax. You know, you can do this, right? But in the aspect of catering and making something for other people, it definitely is an art. And I do corporate catering now. So like that's another thing where it's customer service. A lot of companies, that offer delivery and stuff, they're just worried about, look, I cook the food, you pick it up. Once you grab it, that's your business, right? But my mindset, I'm thinking about getting it to their home and tasting it the way I created it. I don't know if you've ever fried anything and then packaged it up and then it's all soggy once you get back. Like I'm thinking about, I want them to taste it how I designed it to taste. And I say designed it, like that's how I think about food, right? And so it's very much about, like if I'm doing an event, right, and I know that I don't have access to a fryer or a kitchen, I may bring a little small countertop fryer so that I can get that crisp, just so you know what I mean. Where and I've had events where I'm in a place that's not the best, like a open basement or something that doesn't have a kitchen, or open field for a wedding, and where you wouldn't expect, or you would give the caterer some leeway, like, they don't have this. I get it. But I try to make sure like you're at a 5-star restaurant, even though you're in the middle of a field. And so those are the kind of things that you got to think about when you're, cooking food, and, just being mindful of it. I know my wife, I've been married 15 years. She wasn't the best cook when we first got married, but she's learned a lot of things from me along the way. And one of the things, she used to take a long time because she was like stressed out, like, okay, I got to cook this. It's all about multitasking, being able to have your mise en place. That's everything in place. And that's just making sure everything, is out. All of your ingredients are out, they're prepped, and then you start cooking, right? I don't know if you ever made breakfast and it's like, all right, let me cook the eggs, and then, all right, let me cook the bacon. And now while you're cooking the your eggs are done. They're all cold now that, you're working on pancakes, and those are cold. So it's like, you have to know too, what takes long, knowing cooking times. Okay, eggs take 2 seconds to make. So let me work on the pancakes. I can keep the steam in them by putting a cover over them. Let me, cook my bacon. That takes a little longer. And then last thing I'm going to do is cook my eggs, bring it all together. You know what I mean? Still little stuff like that.
I'm learning so much from you, Chris. And I feel like I could be a better cook. And I'm hearing all these things that really anybody listening can apply to so many different things. So I want to go back just a minute or so. That word or phrase you used was mise en place.
Mm-hmm.
And that means what?
Everything in place in French.
Everything in place in French. That's so important, I think, in anything, right? I mean, that's a lesson for us all. So you get everything in place. You get everything in place. Then you're thinking about the timing.
Your mind is settled. So you're like, when you're scrambling, you're like, oh, you may miss a current step that you need to focus on because you're like, oh man, I forgot. I don't even have this in the house. So now you got to run and go get this. Let's say you got a dinner at 10, you're trying to surprise your wife, whatever. And so now it can mess up your plans, or you got to make the excuse, well, I was going to make it like this, but I didn't have this. So just making sure you got everything. And like I said, like you said, this applies with everything, right? Just making sure, from bills to working on a car, just making sure you have all your tools and everything you need before you start the task. It makes it a lot easier. And having the right tools, that's my motto for my cookware. I have chef knives and silicone utensils and stuff. And my motto is the right tool for the right job, right? And that can be used in everything too. Like I'm digging out doing some landscaping. And just yesterday, I needed to, dig out maybe, a yard or two of dirt. And I was just like, man, I could spend this back-breaking work. And I was just like, let me just go rent a little small excavator. I rented it. The time that it took me to go get it and dig it out, it took me actually like 10 minutes to dig it out with the excavator. And I paid the cost. And I was like, well, if I would have paid guys to do this and we did it, it would have took us 3 to 4 hours where our backs would have been hurting. But instead, get the right tool. Now, my back doesn't hurt. The job got done quick. I'm done.
Everything in place, have the right tools. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you deal with issues that arise that maybe you weren't anticipating or that you didn't plan for? How do you adjust on the fly?
Oh my God, that is my life story. So especially in catering, I don't care how much planning and whatever you do, there's always something that goes wrong, whether it's traffic, whether it's you get there, plug everything up, and all the electricity goes out. So really, it's my mastery to this is always having a level head and always knowing that there is a way out of whatever happened. You know, a lot of people will, oh my God, I'm blowing, huffing and puffing. It makes no sense to waste energy doing that instead of trying to figure out a solution. So it's like, now I used to be like that in the beginning of my career, like, oh my God, come on now, but now you got to think on the fly because the client is not going to be like, they're going to be like understanding, I mean, yeah, they may understand that the electricity went out, but, I know a lot of people that are like, hey, it's not my fault. But again, if I'm trying to provide a level of service that's above most, I got to do things to keep the party going, right? What's the motto about in show business? The show must go on. And so, when situations arise like that, just being able to move on your feet, think quickly, and have people around you that can do the same or contribute to a solution is what I feel has worked for me best.
Something that you do in the moment when something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. You just say something to yourself. What do you do in that moment?
So, and my wife thinks this is bad. Like she thinks it's a negative thing. I always expect, I don't want to say I expect the worst, but I always have my mind open to that. Even in like life situations, like I know my parents are going to die one day. You know what I'm saying? And nobody wants to think about this stuff. But I try to think about it in an open-minded way where I'm conditioning myself like everyone's going to die eventually, right? So instead of being so shocked and hurt, I'm going to be hurt regardless. You're going to miss that person. But instead of me being so shocked about it, let me think about it sometimes like, man, let me, and that may trigger another response like, okay, let me go spend some time with her or let me go talk to her for 30 minutes where I'm busy doing this. And so bringing that back to the cooking, you want to be able to think about things that could potentially go wrong. That way, I know when I go on an event to take a lot of extension cords, to have a butane gas, something that I can light, the little portable burners, a way to heat if I'm supposed to have a stove or an oven, to make sure I have a backup. Make little small things, making sure you got jumper cables, a spare tire. If that falls through, I can catch an Uber. Just being mindful of having, making sure that Uber is on my phone, or if you don't use Uber, make sure it's active. That way, if you had to do something, I'm always thinking about that. Like I was just thinking about that the other day. I was taking an order to a client, and I was just like, man, I need to hurry up and get another spare tire because I don't have one anymore. And if I get a flat, how am I going to quickly get this done? So I'm thinking about it. I didn't get a flat, but I'm thinking about it proactively. And then when I get the means or the time to do it, I'll do it. You see what I'm saying?
No, it all makes sense, Chris. We've talked a little bit about your, launching your own business and entrepreneurship, and we've certainly dug into a lot of the details and nitty gritty stuff that it takes to be successful. Yep. I'm curious, is there something behind the scenes, something in that nitty gritty of owning a business, running your own business that has kind of stood out to you in particular over these years that it was like, I wasn't expecting this?
Oh man. Oh, of course. So in 2016, right, we did this wedding, and my wife poked her head because she knows. But we did this wedding, and it was a really big wedding. I think it was like 180 people or something like that, maybe close to 200. It was out in, I don't know where it was, Gainesville, somewhere out there. But it was a lot. It was a big money wedding, and we did the event, but we had issues. Oh, my trailer got stuck in a ditch on the way. Like I slipped off of a curb and it got stuck and we had to call a tow truck. And I always build in about when I'm doing events, I build in about 3 extra hours of time, travel time for incidences like that. So we called a tow truck, they got us out, and we ended up getting there with only, instead of having normally our normal 3 to 2 hours to get set up. And like we had to get set up to start putting out the food and everything. And it was a full service event. So we had to do linens and table decor, all of that stuff. So we only had an hour to do it now. And so we got there and the bride and groom were freaking out because contractually we told them we would be there, about approximately 3 hours before. But we got there. We barely got it. I made it, but we did it. Everybody ate. And then we had a couple of few other issues with like my bartenders. They had an issue with the bartenders that we had. And the point of the matter, it wasn't our usual flawless execution. I'll say that. That's what we aim for, flawless execution. And we were just shy of that bar or whatever, or a little bit shy of that bar, but we didn't drop the ball where they got the food that they asked for. It was hot. It was good. All of that stuff was fine, but the timing was a little off. So long story short, they were wanting to sue us. The father of the bride was a lawyer. And so they didn't want to sue us. They wanted their money back. And so we were like, well, we still provided you a service. The guests ate the food and they consumed it. So we don't feel like you should get a refund. However, here's that customer service. I went back and forth with the father a few times. First, the bride and the groom, and then she had her dad step in because he was a lawyer. And so he was like, going back and forth with this. Long story short, I was like, listen, I do accept the fact that it wasn't perfect and it wasn't up to our usual standards. So I'm willing to give you a partial refund, right, for the part that I felt like, and I can't remember what, maybe a couple thousand or 1,500, but he wanted all of the money back. Like, bro, you still ate. You still ate. It was still good. They were raving about the food, but the timing was we were a little bit late, pretty much. That was like I don't want to say a wake up call for me, but that was kind of one of the biggest moments in my career where I was like, I almost could have got sued. Like I almost went into a depression, like, because you know what I'm saying? I'm used to performing on a certain level, and I had to admit that I dropped the ball, but it wasn't, it wasn't because I was a, slouch or anything like that. It was an accident. And so, we ended up getting over that, but I actually stopped catering after that and then I went, I had just done Comeback Kitchen on Food Network Star. So I had just filmed it, and I had MGM at the National Harbor, Marcus Samuelson's restaurant. He had come to one of the catering companies I used to work at. And I had worked with my old catering company. This is where like I did my boot camp for like the second part of my life. Military, then I worked at this company. That's a story we can probably get into. But Marcus Samuelson had a catering event in the area. He was visiting, and they wanted me to be the lead chef on it. And so I did the event, and then he found out I was on Food Network shows and stuff. So he asked me, he was like, yo, I want you to come to MGM and work in my restaurant I'm opening up. I think it was like, it was beginning of 2016. No, August 2016. And so I left the catering alone, and I went back to the restaurant industry. So, but needless to say, it was like perfect timing because of that whole lawsuit. I didn't want to cater anymore after that, believe it or not. So sorry about that long story, but
no, it was a story that was obviously, deeply personal to you, and has really impacted and affected, the way that you think about things in this business. And as you were telling it, I'm thinking about you in the work that you do when you're cooking for somebody at their wedding, or you're cooking for their catered event, or you're cooking for their business. For them, it's their biggest moment. You do this every day, every week, but for them, this is one of one. Mm-hmm. This is their wedding. This is their event. Yeah. And I'm thinking back to conversations that I've had with Olympians and figure skaters and soccer players and athletes who train for one moment, for years. And then it really all comes down to that one moment. And that requires a mindset that's incredibly challenging to stay that focused and move forward in that construct. I remember talking to Olympic gold medalist Tara Lipinski, the famous figure skater, and she said, I'm in a business that requires perfection, but I'm never going to get it perfect. I have to be comfortable at times with winging it and knowing that, on the way to perfection, I'm going to get pretty close if I do all the things that I need to do. And it has to be for you a very challenging mindset. You're striving for perfection. We know that perfection just can't be achieved, but it's got to be a challenge. Where do you think, as we start to wrap up our conversation, Chris, where do you think all this passion and energy and enthusiasm that you have for this business that you're in comes from?
What I've come to learn about myself in life. So we're going deep, man. I'm going to give you some transparency stuff because I like you, Andrew. So this is going a little deeper, right? So when I was young, I'm 5'11" now, but I was a pipsqueak in high school. Like I was like, if you look at my my high school graduation pictures, I look like I was a kid dressing up for Halloween. like, you know what I'm saying? I was just really underweight, small, petite. And the girls used to be like, oh, he's so cute. But they wouldn't see me like that. Like I was just always kind of undervalued as a human being, or I felt that way. Right. And so I had issues with that growing up. Like I just wasn't good enough. And, everybody was, they're at their average, and I was under average or whatever. So I always felt like I had to overcompensate to prove myself to be good enough. You know what I'm saying? So that was the crux of where my mentality to be the best started. And so even down to the military, I went in, like I said, I was really small and short and stuff like that going in. And I remember my aunt was like he doesn't need to go to the military. He's too little. Oh, another big thing. Let me throw this in. My mom wouldn't let me play football, right? I used to love football. I wanted to play football so bad. And she didn't even let me try because she was like, the coach was like, yeah, you might be a little underweight to play football. But I was like, I just felt like she should have given me the opportunity to try. Let me get hit. And I probably would have like, yeah, I don't want to play this. And so, like I said, I had all these, not opportunities, but these moments where I felt like, not like I couldn't prove myself to be good enough. And so when I got to the military, that was another one. I destroyed boot camp in regards to like how I performed. Like I was in there with a whole bunch of big guys. I scored the best times on the the quals, the push-ups. I did the most. I did I ran the furthest. I got a picture of it with all the scores of the leaderboard. They had a little leaderboard, and I passed with honors pretty much. And that's because I didn't want anybody to say that I wasn't good enough or I was too small or whatever. Now, when I got about 21, I finally got this growth spurt, shot up. I started growing facial hair finally, and I was good after that. But that also happened with business. I was, with catering, just wanting to be the best, never letting anybody be able to doubt my skills or capabilities. And I think, a lot of my friends, they say, Chris, you have a hustle like no other. They always say, dude, you are a beast. Like the stuff that you do. And, I've kind of, and I realize I am, and I'm not trying to I'm special, but because of that whole thing, it's made me have a work ethic like no other, where, if I'm tired, I can go the distance. Like I outperform a lot of people in my field because I have to prove something to everybody that I am good enough. And so now I'm 40, I'm past that mentality, but that is kind of what has gotten me through most of life, to where I realize I am good enough. I don't need to prove that anymore. When you're 40, you realize like you're confident in who you are. But that's what has built my work ethic up until this point. And so going back, I hope I can remember the point when you had mentioned about the the potential lawsuit and being perfect at these events. You're right. Like for them, they're spending all of this money, but in catering and food service, you're only as good as your last meal. Like literally, that's the mindset. So I could be a Michelin star chef. If I come to this event and it's subpar, I'm going to be known from that going forward. Nobody cares that I was a Michelin star chef. So it's a very tough industry to have a good name and to sustain that. It's very tough.
Chris, I have absolutely loved our conversation and have learned so much about cooking and your industry and you as a person. And I just think what you shared there, I'm sure there are so many listening who have experienced doubt and people who don't think they can do something or don't think they have a certain ability or they're not going to achieve a certain goal. And the way you've gone about it, your story is going to motivate so many people listening to take action. And I know it resonated with me, and I know it will resonate with so many listening. And I just think that what you said there, you're only as good as your last meal. I think that obviously applies to your business, but it applies to so much. Yeah. And it's an important reminder that we're never as good as we are on our best day. We're never as bad as we are on our worst day. Yeah. We've got to strive for perfection and hope that we end up with great. And if we have the work ethic and we have the commitment and the passion, and we do the little things and the fundamentals and get back to the basics and build systems and processes to, anticipate issues that might arise, we can find success in anything. Chris, this has been so much fun. There is no question you are a tarp puller. You are in the tarp pulling club. You pull the tarp for your clients. You pull the tarp for the folks on your team. I will have to catch up again soon and hear where you continue to take everything. But thank you for spending some time with me this week. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Andrew. And really quick, I wanted to make a comment on your story of the tarp pulling. And I thought about it, how that applies to me. And that is kind of like my prerequisite for working with me, right? Anybody that I know, I've had to do that over the years, especially with my own business. But like the other day, I have a guy that works with me. He's really good at what he does. He's one of my sous chefs. But we're working on the landscape so that we can open up a restaurant experience here in the spring, summertime. And so we get finished, work is a little slow with corporate orders. And I'm like, look, I need help out here. Can you, help me position some of these boulders so we can finish the landscape? And I expect that out of all of my people. Hey, look, we have the event up. I know this is not your normal job, but I need you to clean the toilets real quick. Whatever we have to do, because I've had to do so much out of what I want to do to fuel what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? And oh my God, the list goes on and on. We'd be here another couple hours if I listed everything. But yeah, that the tarp pulling is a prerequisite for me. And I think that people need to have that mindset. They will go far in business. You have to be that way as an entrepreneur. But if you work for somebody, like it's on a lot of people, especially this new sector of workers, man, they don't want to work. Like, it's like, look, if you help somebody to get to where they need to be, not everybody, there's just some buttholes out there, but if you see somebody that is aligned with your goals and vision, like help them wherever you can. It may not be the position that you are being paid for, but you might have to do something else. Like get in there, get your hands dirty. They will appreciate you. You know what I mean?
Get in there, get your hands dirty. Chef Chris Kyler, I have had so much fun. I've learned a ton. Thank you for being a tarp puller, and we'll have to catch up again soon.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.